Hi there, welcome to Liberty.me live, starting a little bit late due to various shenanigans such as how slowly I eat salad. Very slowly, in fact. I'm Lucy Steigerwald. Sheldon Richman's around here somewhere, though he appears to be a blank screen at this moment. Lovely audience seems to be out there, waiting patiently in the chat room. And this, as that lead-up will suggest, is free association. You know Sheldon from lots of good things like his own blog, Reason.com, in the past, Students Center for Stateless Society, in the past, Liberty, oh my god, words. Freedom Daily, too many freedom and liberty words, libertarianism, we need new words. And all sorts of places like that. You know Sheldon anyway, you do, of course you do. And to a lesser extent, you might know me. Hello. And this evening, I think the idea was talking about Benghazi, which I found a little daunting, but Sheldon was game. So he's game, I'm game. So let's begin this thing.
Okay. Well, the presumptive Democratic presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, appeared before the famous Benghazi committee last week for, if you count the break time, 11 hours. I did watch quite a bit of it until I couldn't take it anymore. It was very interesting, of course. She was Secretary of State at the time, and not only that, she was the person, along with Samantha Power and Susan Rice, who talked a very reluctant, this is the story we've been getting, a very reluctant Barack Obama into leading a NATO air attack on Gaddafi's government in Libya in 2011, causing that government to fall, at which time the leaders among the rebel factions who are Al-Qaeda types, or who were Al-Qaeda types, captured Gaddafi and did some rather vicious things to him, sodomized him with a combat knife before shooting him in the head or something on the roadside. In response to which our Secretary of State, I don't have a Secretary of State, sorry, commented, "We came, we saw, he died," and she cackled. That shows you the class that that woman can display. Now, of course, after that, there was some going through the motions of democracy, but then all hell broke loose, and in Benghazi, a big city in Libya to the east, on the other side of the country from Tripoli, which had a consulate as well as a CIA station, all hell broke loose, and the ambassador, Chris Stevens, and 3 security types, although 2 were mercs, private contractors doing security, were killed in fire. I think Stevens actually dies from inhalation, smoke inhalation, not being shot. He was in a safe room that turned out not to be safe. And then the controversy that came right after that was the administration's line about what happened was that this was a spontaneous demonstration that went crazy because of the that video that was made called "The Innocence of Muslims" or something like that, made by somebody. It was in Tennessee, I forget exactly, and they tried to blame that guy. In fact, that guy was even briefly arrested, I believe. There was actually talk about doing something to that guy. It was the stupidest video. You could probably look it up. Later, then it came out that it really was an Al-Qaeda type, I forget the name of the organization, the Arar al-Sharam or something like that. That was an Al-Qaeda type, if not officially Al-Qaeda, that had done it. And one of the things that came out during the 11 hours, actually, even though Hillary Clinton has testified previously at other hearings on this matter, one of the things that came out, at least was news to me, and apparently news to a lot of people, was that while she was telling the public, and while Samantha Power and Susan Rice were telling the public all that weekend on all the Sunday shows, that this was just a spontaneous demonstration against this offensive video, that got out of hand, she was telling the Egyptian officials and her own daughter that this was an Al-Qaeda type attack, a premeditated, planned attack. So, and this ties in with her emails and all kinds of stuff. As other people have already pointed out, she was not asked the key questions because for a couple of reasons. The Democrats on the committee don't want to ask because it would undercut her and Obama. They don't want to do that. And the Republicans don't want to ask because they, ultimately, while they can't admit it, support Obama's policy. So they didn't ask her, why did you convince Obama to go into Libya in the first place? What's the real reason? Now, she has expressed regret for her Iraq vote in 2002, right, to give a blank check to George W. Bush to do whatever he wanted with regard to Saddam Hussein in Iraq. It cost her...
Because it's trendy to regret it now.
It's trendy to regret it now. She did it then because there was an election coming up, and she did not want to look like a dove, and so she didn't even bother to read the national security document that apparently in itself was kind of sketchy. It wasn't some big, long, detailed thing, this thick. Nothing like the IRS code. She wouldn't go down the street to read it, but she voted to give him a blank check. Later she said, well, I didn't know he was going to go to war. Duh. That cost her the 2008 nomination, most likely, right? The biggest thing that Obama could say, who was unknown and inexperienced, the biggest thing he could say against her in 2007 and 8 when he was running against her is that I was right on Iraq and you were wrong. Now, he wasn't in the Senate, but he had made a speech, and he was known to have been skeptical, very skeptical, if not outright against it. And that killed her. That killed her. She had a clear path to the presidency, at least she thought, and this unknown person comes along whose middle name is Hussein and who's an African American, and he beats her. You can imagine how she must have felt about that. So she wasn't asked about all that. I mean, the party line at the time was that Gaddafi was going to go to Benghazi and slaughter everybody, which he never said. He hadn't done anything like that in other cities. He was trying to put down a rebellion. But there's been reporting on this. There's no reason. There was no reason to believe he was just going to go in and do a wholesale genocide, which is the word that was being thrown around by the three female humanitarian interventionists, when all the military people were saying this is nuts, because they saw what happened in Iraq. And in Iraq, they put ground troops in. They weren't talking about putting ground troops in Libya because they figured the American people wouldn't go for it. They didn't like the idea of going into Syria back then, remember. Anyway, I can tell you probably what was really going on real quickly, and then we can open it up. I think a big reason for her wanting to go in, and Scott Horton, I think, has argued this very well, is that she looked very bad, the administration looked very bad with respect to the Arab Spring up until that time. Think about Egypt, where there was this incredible outpouring of opposition to Mubarak, and people in the streets in Tahrir Park, in the square there, and Hillary stood by Mubarak to the bitter end. She called him a friend because she and Bill had, met him and had dinner with him a lot of times during the Bill Clinton years in the White House. She called him a friend. She spoke well of him. She stood by him. They stood by him until it was clear he couldn't survive. And then they backed his second in command.
Yeah.
Forget his name. Suleiman, something like that. Omar Suleiman, something like that. Who was torturer in chief under Mubarak. Mm-hmm. They supported him, and then he didn't make it. And then, of course, once the Muslim Brotherhood candidate Morsi won the presidency and that got thrown out in a coup, the Obama administration has been supportive of the new military dictatorship, but that's jumping ahead. So they look bad about the Arab Spring because of what they did in Egypt, and I believe she and Power and Rice were looking for an opportunity to look good. So they must have thought, let's get into Libya on the side of the rebels and overthrow Gaddafi. Remember, Gaddafi was brought in from the cold by George W. Bush. He gave up his junk, which was sort of masquerading as a nascent nuclear weapons facility. It was just a bunch of junk stuff he bought at garage sales, and it looked like it could be turned into a nuclear facility. But he came onto the Allied side, the NATO side. So they went in with air power, and then this mess followed. One more thing I'll mention, and I'm sure that we'll have plenty of time to talk about this, but I don't want to take up all the time just with the introductory remarks. We know from Seymour Hersh and others that what was happening in Benghazi after the overthrow of Gaddafi's arms cache was open wide. He had lots of guns and ammunition and all kinds of stuff, heavy stuff, missiles, shoulder-launched, ground-to-air missiles that he had gotten from former communist countries. And that now fell into the hands of basically, at least temporarily, the U.S. and Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and they were funneling that stuff along with manpower to Syria to fight Assad, which, this is 2011, don't forget, 2012, into 2012. This is what became al-Nusra, which is the Syrian affiliate of al-Qaeda, and the Islamic State. It helped feed all of that. A lot of these guys were Iraq war veterans fighting the U.S. in Iraq in the Sunni insurgency. So this is the real story that was going on that nobody wants to talk about, that certainly nobody wanted to ask Hillary about, the people that actually had access. Okay, I guess that's enough background. We can bring out details as we go.
Well, I guess what always comes to my mind, unfortunately, when I think about Benghazi, is I think about partisan politics, not war, not any concrete ill effects of the Libya invasion or anything like that. I think Republicans obsessing and Democrats feeling superior that Republicans are focusing on what they claim to be a non-story. And it's such a lovely way of not talking about anything that actually occurred and not thinking about whether Libya was a horrible mistake or not. This comes up a lot. The news doesn't report on what happened in the foreign countries so much so often as they report on what candidate X and incumbent Y have to say about what happened. Because why would you want to know what actually happened? All you need is the filter of the politician and the appropriate partisan response to what has occurred.
Yeah. Did I lose you? Oh, yep. There you are. I lost you for a second. I thought maybe you stopped talking, but I think you just froze. Go ahead.
Well, I did stop at partisan reaction.
Yeah. No, that's the way things work in Washington. You're right. There's no peace movement to speak of, so no one's asking the real questions. Why did we do that, especially after the experience in Iraq? How could you possibly do that after Iraq? Think about it. And like I said, there they put ground troops in, and a lot of good it did. If you're just going to do it from the air, you can see what was going on. The American people wouldn't have tolerated putting in ground troops. They were already weary and wary of Iraq and Afghanistan. Let's not leave Afghanistan out of the story, especially since that's flaring up again. So they wouldn't have tolerated that. But so she and the others still wanted the U.S. to have this big role, except it couldn't be too big. So they called it leading from behind, which of course the Republicans now like to mock. She also calls this smart power, and as recently as the debate last a couple weeks ago on CNN, she bragged that was a great example of smart power. How could she be bragging about what happened in Libya, given what's going on in Libya? I think it was James Webb on the stage that night who said, "Try flying into Tripoli. You can't do it." It's just open warfare among factions and warlords and all these groups vying to be the most. And ISIS is in there now. ISIS has spread. George Bush. When is George Bush going to get called before the dock to answer for his crimes? None of this was happening. I'm no fan of Saddam Hussein, obviously. He's a dictator.
Or the Taliban.
But to go in and it's like I compare, when you go into a foreign country and knock off the government, knowing nothing about the society, the culture, the history, blah, blah, none of that. It's like playing Jenga. You know that game Jenga? It's like playing Jenga after you've had several beers, you smoke the full joint, and you're blindfolded, and the room is dark because they turn all the lights off. That's what it's like. You don't know what piece you're pulling out and what's going to happen. But we saw it so recently in Iraq. How can they possibly explain what they did in Libya?
Well, you don't know what will happen when you pull a piece out, but you could make an educated guess that the whole fucking thing is going to come down.
That's the way to bet.
For some reason, that's never the contingency that they seem to prepare for.
That is the safe bet. Exactly, it's a safe bet. And they act like they can go in and we can vet the right people and elect a legislature, a parliament. You know, they go in like they're the man of system that Adam Smith talks about in Theory of Moral Sentiments. You know, they can go in and just move things around on the chessboard, and everything's going to go just exactly where they put it. And they never learn. Of course, I always whenever I catch myself saying they never learn, I quickly follow up by reminding myself they have no incentive to learn. You don't learn when you have no incentive to learn. They benefit from this. They're certainly not. No. They're certainly not suffering because of this. I mean, the politicians. They benefit.
That's true. I mean, you would like to argue that even though it's obviously twisted how American soldiers are prioritized over, anyone in a foreign country, but knowing that, you could at least think maybe the deaths of, 4,500 in Iraq, and I forget how many in Afghanistan. Yeah. But that was some kind of disincentive, or anything at all like that, and it never is.
Well, because in Libya you weren't going to have American casualties, right. Most likely. Here they've gotten, quote, smart, right? They do it from the air.
Right.
And now they can even do, and I won't say now because they've been doing it. They even they have the drones, so a pilot's not going to even get shot out of the air. In Libya, I mean, they were flying, manned strikes. So I don't know what drone use there was, but there were actually people flying planes over Libya. There was some possibility, but still, 30,000 feet or whatever you are, you're pretty safe. So that's what politicians really worry about, not who they kill overseas, only when Americans get killed. So if they found a way to have war with a very small probability of U.S. casualties, which means they can get away with it. By the way, my friend Ross Lovato suggested, he suggested a bumper sticker, but I suggest a T-shirt. Foreign lives matter. I think that's a great one. We ought to all be sporting that.
Oh my God, yeah, that's the necessary shirt. If shirts.
I know. I don't know why I didn't think of that. I kick myself for not having thought of that a long time ago.
Yeah. That was just tempting tangent that I'm going to try to resist right now. Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, it just all of our foreign policy discussions kind of drive me nuts because they come back to these hideous sticking points about never learning, about arrogance, about just the fact that some of the same people at home who say, sometimes the quasi-libertarian conservatives who think that we're almost on their side, and especially with a new, maybe a new, worse, more liberal president, we should come on over to the right, to their side, because we're almost like them. We're just a little kooky. And they're often the ones who know that at home, this kind of top-down, treating people like puppets stuff doesn't work. And the moment they get to a foreign country, it does. And meanwhile, liberals, of course, can control domestic policy beautifully. Every wish comes true. And they almost have a little bit of humbleness when it comes to foreign countries, but not enough. You still get the idea you can just in war a little bit, coming from Democrats, And Clinton did this too. And drones are going to make it easier and easier. I mean, you can just sort of be lackadaisical about firing a couple of cruise missiles at a new country and assuming there'll be no consequences. I mean, if you missile a pharmaceuticals factory and only the janitor dies, I mean, who cares? Just one person who's dead now. What does it matter?
That's something that Clinton did do. Yeah. That's something that Clinton did do. It was an antibiotics factory in Sudan, which they trivialized by calling it an aspirin factory, which it was not. Sure. So she's, it runs in the family. She was all for the bombing of Kosovo. which accelerated ethnic cleansing and led to the deaths of many, many people. So this, and I mean, just think about the arrogance. So she wants to look good before the world. They were on the side of the people against a dictatorship. She had to look good to make up for what she did in Egypt and other places, Tunisia and whatnot, Bahrain, where the Arab Spring was crushed. So she has to look good. I don't care about who this might kill. I need to look good. After all, I want to run for president. Obviously, had that in her mind. She's had that in her mind ever since she lost, and way before that. So it doesn't matter over there who dies, how many people die, what mess you leave in your wake of your activity. All that matters is you look good. And Robert Gates, who was defense secretary at the time, who of course also came from the Bush administration, he was a Republican that Obama held over. He's quoted in an article in the Daily Beast saying, he was against it, by the way. He was against it. He said that Hillary's plan for after they overthrew the government was, we'll play it by ear. That's what Gates says. We'll play it by ear. In other words, they had no plan. They go in and destroy a government and kill people and open up this huge cache of arms, and we'll play it by ear. I mean, that's criminal. At the least, it's criminal negligence. It's a lot worse than that, I think. But I mean, just contemplate the evil involved there. Playing a game with a whole society for your image, so that you can become president.
But again, though, there's no incentive not to do that. I mean, the entire society. Sure, there's partisan bickering and sort of what some call histrionics when it comes to Obama now and Bush before. But it's not. I mean, most of the time it's actually I could use more of that. I mean, more of the the calling these people awful. But it's like, I'm surprised that the Democrats and the Republicans don't wink at each other at the end of the day, because they trade off. That's all they do. And any sincere partisan outrage is fascinating because they're all doing it, and they all believe that they get to fiddle with anyone that they like. I don't know why. It's because they're good, I guess, because they're the good guys. And Republicans think Democrats, are too hard on America, but Democrats believe they have the same noble, God-infused power to go about the world fiddling and,
Yeah. No, as I quipped on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, when Republicans bomb foreigners, they're in effect saying what we say goes. And when Democrats bomb foreigners, they're saying we're doing this for your own good. So it's the imperialists versus the humanitarian interventionists. If you can really find the difference, if you can find the difference in any substantive way, please write me, because I'd like to know.
If you're sitting safely at home, of course you can try to find one, but that doesn't matter because they don't care. When their family member got blown to actual literal pieces. I mean, why would they? These people wouldn't care either. I always go back to, in my mind, I like to think of it in terms of, what if Amsterdam came to bomb a city because they were so outraged by our drug policy? I'd be like, gosh, it is a bad drug policy, Amsterdam, but you just blew up my place of work, and you maimed my brother, and do they expect people to sit there and be like, well, that's a good point. America, I've heard America's horrific, so these bombs, and boy, Gaddafi was a real asshole, so everything that follows is fine. That's not
our society's
reality.
Our society's being destroyed by the exceptional nation.
Yeah. They really expect people to react this way. And I feel like every discussion and topic of debate comes to a grinding halt when I come back to this. I don't know how to make them realize that these people are people. And that's one thing I will love Ron Paul for the end, until the end of time, is because that was his very basic lesson, especially in 2012, is like, those are people over there. That's why they're pissed, because they're humans. Like, I'm a human, you're a human. I mean, it's a condescendingly basic lesson that nobody can learn. It's horrible.
Well, because they don't really believe they're human. They're not American, so they're slightly a cut below. And on the other, and to just add another piece to this, the same people are so upset that Russia is giving some help to Assad. Like as if, well, how dare Putin do that? Nobody does that sort of thing. How dare Putin do that? Nobody does that sort of thing. How dare they go into a country, another country, and bomb things and take a hand in its fate? It's hilarious to watch the reaction to Putin. You don't have to be a fan of Putin to say what I'm saying, as I'm sure you know. Although some people want to immediately jump on anybody who says what I'm saying as, oh, so you're a Putin lover. No, I'm not a Putin lover. But he's not doing anything the U.S. hasn't done 10 times over repeatedly.
Now, I was confused by your wording on this issue at one point in the speech,
yeah.
But I do understand what you're saying now. I mean, like, I'm annoyed when any country invades any other country because, I can't think of a time when that led to anything good, No, but I mean, the hypocrisy, of course, is you are not. I mean, of course, you're right there.
No, I was not hoping that Putin would go into Syria. I'm hoping the U.S. gets out of there.
Yeah.
I just was. I mean, it was totally expectable. To be expected that the U.S. government and all the hawks and all the American exception type people were going to say exactly what they said. That somehow the rules for Putin are different from the rules for Obama. By the way, I meant to mention before.
Well, of course they are.
There was no declaration of war or even authorization of force for Libya. I meant to throw that in back then. Okay, they had no congressional authorization, whatever. The Obama administration wouldn't even invoke the War Powers Act, claiming it was not hostilities. America was not getting into hostilities. When you drop bombs, apparently you're not getting into hostilities. So he totally skirted the law, the Constitution, decency, everything. They're bombing in Syria. He's got no authorization for Syria. They're bombing in Iraq. He's got no authorization for Iraq. They claim they're using the 2000 authorization, but that was totally different. That was about Saddam. I'm not sanctioning that, but there's no way you can apply it to the situation today. And there have been legal scholars when he asked for some authorization. When he argued that authorization was good enough, but he'd be glad to take new authorization. He got condemned by legal scholars really from a variety of positions on the political spectrum, saying that this was a bid for the power to commit total war. That's what Obama was actually bidding for.
They're still using the 2001 authorization for use of military force as well, right? Sometimes they fall back on that for their own stuff.
Because they can go after Al Qaeda anywhere in the world.
Any tenuous connection to Al Qaeda,
even associated. It's associates. Of course, ISIS, Islamic State or whatever, is not an associate. It broke from Al Qaeda because it doesn't like Al Qaeda. It doesn't like what's his name, Zawahiri. So you can hardly call that an associate if they've broken. They've divorced.
Close enough. So,
and in Syria, of course, we're at least tacitly, and maybe more than tacitly now, siding with al-Nusra, which is the official card-carrying franchise of Al-Qaeda in Syria. We're on their side. And even our great ally, Israel, has given them their fighters medical care and then sent them back to the battlefield. So we're on Iran's side in Iraq. We're on Al-Qaeda's side in Syria. Sounds very confusing. Unless, and I wrote an article about this last week, unless the whole point is to create destabilization. And that's the only thing that really makes sense. You can't make sense of it any other way. Why are we against Iran in Syria? Because Assad and Iran are allies. And on Iran's side in Iraq. I mean, the two countries are like sitting next to each other. You got this imaginary line. On one side, we're on we're on Al-Qaeda's side, and on the other side, we're against that kind of, radical Sunni Wahhabism stuff, and we're with the Shiites and Iran. So you figure it out.
I mean, do they really think that we can take this on a country-by-country basis and there'll be no sort of spillover? I mean, it does.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. It feels like it's on purpose more than they admit sometimes. It really does. And
here's the funny thing. Tony Blair, who of course was right there with George Bush throughout all the horrible policies, war policies of the 2002, 3, and beyond. The other day in an interview with, what's his name, Fareed Zakaria on CNN, kind of apologized. Now, he attributed his mistakes to bad intelligence. Okay, that's total crap. Because, and as Scott likes to remind us many, many times, there were people back then in the intelligence organizations, agencies, who were giving information to reporters at McClatchy, which was back then Knight Ridder, and the AP, and other reporters, and they were publishing it, that the intelligence insiders knew it was bogus intelligence, bogus claims about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction. So to say, we made a bad mistake, but it was on the basis of bad intelligence, that's a lie, total lie. You can go back and read it. It's a lie. But here's something interesting that Blair is saying. Now, he says, what we did might have given rise to ISIS. He does say that. That's kind of funny, though. Might have given rise. But then when he's asked what to do now, what should we do now? He says, well, look, we've tried everything. In Iraq, we put in ground troops, and it's a mess. In Libya, we didn't put in ground troops, and it's a mess. And in Syria, we haven't done anything, and it's a mess. Now, that last one is really a big lie. The CIA has been training so-called radicals who end up going over to Al-Qaeda and ISIS since 2011, 2012. We already said they were running guns and people from Benghazi to Syria. So it's a lie to say nothing has been done. And one big thing they did was declare Assad illegitimate, which made Syria a magnet for all the jihadis, thinking, okay, if the U.S. is going to be kicking out Assad, let's get in there and be ready to take advantage of the vacuum. So we in effect invited them in. So to say that we did, we have done nothing there. We, meaning the U.S. and NATO, have done nothing there, and it's a mess anyway. It's just so dishonest. It's unbelievable. And he's been taken to task by various people. Justin had a good piece about Blair, his bogus apology, and I recommend that people go read it at antewar.com. Yeah,
do that. I haven't read it yet, but I bet it's good. I mean, if you I'm going to just I'm going to violate Godwin's law right here and say Hitler didn't make a mistake when he tried to kill all the Jews. He wanted to kill all the Jews. If you do something nasty, I'm not talking about scale, nobody needs to pick at this statement, exact body counts or anything like that, but just if you do something nasty that causes people to die, you get to either say it's on purpose or you can pretend it's all a mistake. I mean, the U.S. just killed 22 people in a Doctors Without Borders hospital because of bad intelligence, right? Now, they said, here's where the hospital is. Afghani troops were just in that hospital. They should have known where the damn hospital is when you drop a couple bombs on it for a while. So, I mean, it's just, anything that is now unpopular, anything that looks bad, that causes people to die, it's a mistake. And then if you, accuse people of deliberately targeting a hospital or going into Iraq, with any sort of vaguely malevolent motivations, it sounds conspiratorial, but just, a mistake is kind of the magic word. Good intentions and a mistake is the magic word for the U.S. messing with these places.
Yeah. I think instead of referring to bad intelligence, we should call it what it is: stupid evil.
Yeah.
Bad intelligence. Then the other thing you say after that is, and I take full responsibility, which is a code word for, I'm not talking about this anymore, so don't ask me. That's all. Nobody quits, right? I think in England, the Hillary character would resign. I think. At least in older days, they would have. And the head of the CIA and the Defense Department, they would have resigned just to try to maintain their dignity.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I'm rather disappointed, Lucy, that you seem so far behind the times. You broke Godwin's law and mentioned Hitler, but if you've been paying attention to revisionist history this past week or so, you would know that the real evildoer was the Mufti, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. He's the one that came up with the idea to wipe out Europe's Jews. Hitler had that was not on his mind. It was no intention of his. And my source on this is that noted historian and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, that was good, huh? That was that was historically sound, and
that was our comic relief for the week.
Oh God, that was awful.
Just when you thought he couldn't top the Wile E. Coyote bomb, he did. He did it. He topped it.
Yep. That was really bad.
So, where do we go from here? Any questions from the crowd, the throng?
Right.
What am I reading here? Scott Horton and Jeff Tucker are going to be on after us.
Yep. Hey,
well, you guys have a tough act to follow. That's all I can say.
They'll be fine.
No, they won't. They'll struggle. We build them up, and then you got to keep them going.
That's true.
So we're taking questions from the peanut gallery. Anybody?
I think the peanuts are quiet right now.
Okay, here's the quiz. Is war the health of the state? That's the first quiz question. So what else? We still have some time, Lucy. We're not running out of gas. We've never run out of steam before the hour was up.
I know. I'm just I don't have my tea doesn't have enough caffeine in it or something today.
Well, we could talk about Afghanistan real quickly because there are things going on. We had the first American combat guy, or no, he's not a combat troop because we don't call him a combat troop, but he was a special force, Stellar Force sergeant, Master Sergeant Wheeler, die. What was it? Last Thursday in northern Iraq. He was part of a U.S. team that was giving advice and aid to a Kurdish squad or whatever that was going to free about 70 prisoners from a compound held by ISIS, and apparently they were going to all get killed. Our Secretary of War, I don't call him Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War Ash Carter says they could see by satellite that there were graves that had been dug ready to kill these guys, so they had to go in. And according to Carter, the U.S. guys there, the Delta Force guys, weren't supposed to actually be engaging in combat, but when the Kurds met resistance, the Americans charged ahead to help free these guys, and Wheeler I guess was shot. So he's the first casualty, not only since 2011 American casualty in Iraq, but the first since Obama announced that combat operations had ended in Iraq. So we're getting into Orwellian territory here. You don't have to be designated a combat troop to be a troop in combat.
Well, there's a whole just horrible conversation to have about how words mean nothing and how, touching on Wars Act. Nothing, combat isn't combat, and it doesn't count as a war unless we say it counts. Now, I will say, to put on my statist minarchist hat for a second,
yeah.
If the troops are already there, if you're going to be an American soldier who dies in combat, because obviously that's what that was, I will say that trying to rescue some dudes from an ISIS prison is a lot better cause than I can think of. Now, I don't know. Sometimes I try to. The way that the Bin Laden raid. I have some questions like why didn't you keep him alive for intelligence purposes, things like that. But if and like the existence of SEALs at all, I'm sort of dubious about. But fundamentally, if all the U.S. had done in response to 9/11 was to stage the Bin Laden raid, I would not be as peeved as I am for so many reasons. So there are these. If if we're making our list of what the worst sort of foreign intrusions are, I tend to think that sort of special forces raids, particularly when you're trying to rescue people, I will admit I'm less mad about that. I am mad about the fact that the Iraq War is going to start again. Not that it ever stopped. I mean, I am mad about that. I would prefer to take everybody out, but I will admit that in that particular case, I'm not as annoyed as I am about missiles, and drone strikes.
Well, I'd say, they shouldn't be there. I know you agree with that. They shouldn't be there.
Right.
And by doing what they're doing, they're proclaiming that the ISIS is right and that we really are on the Shiite side of this fight, and that's not going to do us any good.
I know.
I agree. I do believe they are trying to goad the U.S., goad Obama into sending in troops so that they can use that for recruiting. They can kill some Americans. It's win-win all around for those guys if the U.S. pours troops in. So looks like Obama's playing right into their hands. Maybe not quite yet. I don't know if he's made a decision, but Carter's talking about more operations directly conducted by the U.S., air and ground, and perhaps more ground troops, but I guess he still has to convince Obama, because I don't think the reporting is that Obama hasn't made up his mind yet, but Carter's out there talking about it.
Right.
So they're doing what some of his previous associates did in the early days of his administration. They're publicly lobbying Obama instead of doing it behind the scenes. They're talking it up, just like with the so-called surge in Afghanistan. They talked publicly in order to get him, because there were people that wanted him to take a more moderate approach. But it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good.
No.
And let's not forget Yemen. As long as we're talking about this stuff, we have to mention Yemen. No, to my knowledge, there are no U.S. troops on the ground. Well, I guess there could be. I'm sure there's CIA and maybe some special ops people. But we are making it possible. The U.S. is, if I slip and say we, understand. The U.S. is making it possible for Saudi Arabia to fight, and other Gulf countries, to fight a brutal war against the Yemeni people. There's a starvation blockade. It's the poorest country in the Middle East. They import most of their food, and yet the Saudis have had helped by the U.S. have had a starvation blockade against Yemen now for months. I'm not sure how long exactly. And with U.S. help, the Saudis and others are flying air missions and bombing using cluster bombs, bombing people. Why? Because, well, a U.S. puppet who got elected when he was the only name on the ballot got elected, and he's been driven from office, and the people putting pressure on that government, because for years they wanted autonomy, are a group called the Houthis, which are of a kind of a strange Shiite-related sect, and have gotten some, from what I understand, minor support over the years from Iran. So again, the obsession with Iran is leading the U.S. into a policy that's killing tons of innocent people. It is absolute misery there, and the U.S. quashed a UN investigation into this, an inquiry into war crimes. The U.S. ended up siding with Saudi Arabia to kill it. This is unbelievable. This is from the Nobel Prize-winning, Peace Prize-winning president. Why don't they at least revoke the damn prize?
Well, they'd have to take back Kissinger's, too. Don't forget he has one.
Yeah, I know.
The real shock is when a decent organization or person actually wins that prize.
A libertarian, a libertarian in Friend of Bastiat was one of the first winners.
Oh, really?
A Frenchman named Frederic Passe. He shared it with the International Red Cross, the first Nobel Prize winner.
I didn't know that.
Look it up on the FEE site. I wrote about it way back when I was editor of the Freeman.
All right, then. We had one question snuck in there, which was simply... Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I guess we have two now. You guys are always... Oh, actually, you asked, and we're just slow. Okay, so Todd Baker asks, did Hillary do anything illegal? Which, Oh,
illegal.
So, it's always been inside the...
I don't really think that question matters much, because, what Michael Kinsley once said, the scandal in Washington is not what they do that's illegal, it's what they do that's legal.
Absolutely.
So, that's a little like counting angels on the head of a pin.
I mean,
anyway, to quote Hillary, what difference does it make?
Yes. I mean,
That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have enough time to go into that now, but it's always tough to ask a bunch of anarchists that question because we may blink confusedly at the relevance of it. I don't even know, honestly. I think the email stuff sounds borderline, and some of it, but I don't think she's going to get punished for the email stuff. And the more Libya details, I don't know. Like, I mean, well, violating the War Powers Act, but who the hell doesn't do that? I mean, really? I did that last week. No, I didn't.
Well, I suppose that would be Obama's responsibility anyway.
Right, yeah.
I don't think she can violate that because she's not president.
True. Not yet.
But they all ought to be, I don't know, sent to Devil's Island, exiled.
Yeah, like a reasonably humanitarian prison far from... Or like, I'm usually into marooning, I think. So we're not going to starve or torture them because we're not as bad as they are. Just give them an island somewhere. I just feel like in about 10 years they will build some battleships and come back to...
Where they can grow their own food, but they can't build a raft because the way the currents... remember that? Probably don't remember the movie Papillons with Steve McQueen and great movie, by the way.
I love Papillons.
Oh, you love it. Great. Well, that's... I mean, and Dustin Hoffman, they were fantastic. That's what they did, right? They put them on Devil's Island. They couldn't swim off, although Steve McQueen eventually found a way to get off. But, the currents make it very hard. And then you have to grow your own food, so you don't even need guards. It doesn't cost money.
Well, no coconut rafts for them. They're not going to pull a Papillon.
Right.
Yeah, oh, God, I just want to talk about Steve McQueen all day, but we can't.
Go see that movie. Everybody go see that movie. And also watch The Americanization of Emily.
Yes.
Great movie. I put up the link to my most recent article now on Free Association, and it begins with that great quote from that where the James Garner character, it's fantastic, he says, we perpetuate war by exalting its sacrifices, and I tied that in with the death of the Sergeant Wheeler, because, there were the pictures of the flag-draped coffin and how heroic he is, and, blah, blah, blah. Now, I really, look, the guy was obviously brave. He risked his life and got killed trying to save those guys. I'm not trying to knock that. I'm saying that that's then used to romanticize war. War is an opportunity, in their view, to show your virtue, to be virtuous. And then that sucks people in. They join the army because of stuff like that. At least some people do.
The bizarre thing is that the way that people speak about war, they may speak about him who died in the service of, with all the anarchist caveats in the world, in the service of a task that was actually rescuing people. They will speak about that with the same hushed reverence as they will about bombing the shit out of various cities. They act as if everything done under the banner of the military and the U.S. is morally equal and all of it glorious, which diminishes, they have no way to tell. Everything is as good as everything else. Killing is as good as rescuing, as long as you do it for the military. It's dreadful. But that is a very good movie. Okay. People should go in approximately 2 minutes to go hang out in the internet style with Scott and Jeff Tucker and talk more about depressing war stuff with Eye on the Empire. I feel like honestly that I have 10 p.m. also. We have something else that sounded good. I believe it involves Corey Massimino, my friend.
Oh yeah.
I thought they were doing the SFL stuff tonight. It's a friend to all, truly.
He's a good guy.
I'm sorry, that's next week. That might be next week. I think I'm telling lies here. Sorry, kids. But maybe you guys should watch that next week because that'll be good. All right.
Okay, we will be back in 2 weeks with a topic to be named later, to be announced, TBA, to be announced.
Well, I feel like we got a lot of almost topics here tonight, especially here at the end. We could just talk about Steve McQueen and James Garner all day. Or something.
Two of my favorite actors, definitely.
Yay!
See The Americanization of Emily. Everybody out there, I order you to do it.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, I will break the non-aggression principle.
Wow, that is serious.
That's serious. That's how important it is. I know best for you folks.
That's right.
We're good. Okay, well, I see it's the top of the hour.
All right, go look at Sheldon's Free Association blog and Reason when he has stuff, and just read his stuff because it's.
And this is at Any War and Vice.
I got a bunch for every time I say I have stuff in progress, but I swear I really do this time.
Well, read her column at
and Vice, yeah.
Read her column at antiwar.com and read antiwar.com from top to bottom.
Yeah. All
and
right.
listen to Scott Horton's radio show.
Yeah.
Great show.
We love Scott. He's
okay,
good.
Lucy. See ya.
All right. I'll see you next time. Bye.